sit back, relax, and turn on your Tell Me Vision. TV debuts of 1990. When 1990 came, it was the definite end of the 1980s. People became more cynical, and that was reflected in the new TV shows that came out. TV was getting darker and edgier. For the first few years of the 90s, people still retained some of the fashions of the 80s, like clothes and hairstyles, but the attitude was definitely different. In one way, it was okay, because people were starting to cut loose a little more. Some 80s TV, but not all of it, was pretty tame. The 90s was all about pushing boundaries. Some shows were quite good, and were just about at movie quality. Production values and acting quality were really very decent. Like every year in television, some shows worked and some didn't. One thing was for sure, there was no going back to the la-di-da carefree days of television. Everything from action to comedy to children's shows attempted to be more socially significant and, ugh, there was always some statement, wasn't there? But in the midst of all that, there was a lot of fun stuff to watch. This is such a big video, but I've got a lot of ground to cover. I talk about all the popular shows that came out this year, along with a lot of obscurities that I feel are important to talk about when you're talking about 1990 in television. I also talk about notable events in television history and the TV debuts of many celebrities. Some of the celebrities that started on TV this year will surprise you. I've divided the video into these categories: action, children's shows, comedy, drama, educational, game shows, horror and sci-fi, music, news, superhero, talk shows, other TV events of 1990, and TV celebrity debuts of 1990, in that order. Skip around where you want to, but this whole video is a trip. Action shows. The Adventures of the Black Stallion. This ran for 3 seasons on the Family Channel. It was based on the classic novel and film of the Black Stallion and centered around a horse, his human friends, and their adventures. Mickey Rooney was the star. The Black Stallion is pretty wild and only lets Alec, a 15-year-old boy, ride him. Although the stallion is a racehorse, he finds himself in various odd adventures for the next 3 years. Broken Badges. This is a cop show that didn't take, that really should have. Only 7 episodes were made for CBS. It starred Miguel Ferrer, Ernie Hudson, and Charlotte Lewis, among others. Great cast. It was about misfit cops being put together and fighting crime. Ernie Hudson was in a comedy show with the same basic premise way earlier in 1986 called The Last Precinct. This, like The Last Precinct, was a Stephen J. Cannell show, but more serious, although it still had its amusing moments. Cop Rock. This show is legendary for its failure, and I've got some inside knowledge on this disaster of a series. I knew a man who created what was going to be an action show set in the future and based on a sexy policewoman. Shannon Tweed was going to be the star, and Gene Simmons of Kiss was going to produce it. At this time, Gene was into acting and trying to get into producing. My friend created the comic book on which this show was going to be based. Everything was set. They were just about to start filming when, all of a sudden, on the set, ABC reneged. They thought the show was going to be too expensive. Now, keep in mind, Gene was going to put some of his own money into it, but without network backing, it was just impossible. I've been told that Gene is actually a very nice guy in person, and he felt bad when he had to break the news to my buddy, but that was how it ended. Cop Rock was a hastily put together piece of garbage. It was cheaper by a long shot. The show Cops on Fox was a popular hit. Although Cop Rock was scripted with actors, it was presented a lot like Cops, but with music montages. I caught this on TV at the time and thought it was absolutely terrible. It lasted only 11 episodes. Believe it or not, this actually came from the mind of Stephen Bochco, who envisioned a musical version of his hit show, Hill Street Blues. It actually had a good cast of actors, but this was an idea that should never have been attempted. I can't imagine my friend's show would have been that expensive to produce, and it would have been a hit. Shannon Tweed as a sexy policewoman, Gene Simmons' name attachment. I'm sure it would have lasted more than 11 episodes. DEA. For 13 episodes on Fox, this show was based on true stories of the Drug Enforcement Agency. To me, it sounds like it could have been interesting. It combined recreations of events with actual footage. Gabriel's Fire. This aired on ABC for just one season. The star was James Earl Jones. It was a serious crime show about a former Chicago police officer who was wrongfully sentenced to life imprisonment over 20 years earlier. A lawyer wants to help him get released for his testimony in another case. After he gets released, he becomes a private detective and works for the lawyer who freed him, helping other people who are wronged by the system. After this season, the show was canceled, then retooled as Pros and Cons for the next season. In its next incarnation, the show was made lighter in tone. It still, however, starred James Earl Jones and Madge Sinclair from the previous series. Pros and Cons had a shorter run of 12 episodes and added Richard Crenna to the cast. ABC really wanted the show to go over, but it didn't. Jones had even won an Emmy for the first season. Grand Slam. This show was so awesome. It starred John Schneider and Paul Rodriguez as two bounty hunters who have been forced to work together. They weren't pals at first, but become buddies in the pilot. It was an action comedy. The two tracked down some pretty bad criminals. The two leads, different as they are, work together very well. Unfortunately, only 8 episodes were made. Out of them, only 6 were aired on TV. Like a lot of shows that aired on CBS this year, Grand Slam wasn't given a chance to succeed and was preempted a lot. The show was hard to track down until it just stopped altogether. This show could have gone on for years. Help. This only lasted 6 episodes and was a real bomb, despite having some talented people in it. John Mahoney, best known as Martin Crane on Frasier, was the series lead. Wesley Snipes and David Caruso had early roles in this series. The title stood for Harlem East Side Life-Saving Program. It combined the resources of the fire department, police department, and emergency services in one unit. What's interesting to note is that this same basic idea was used later in 1999 with the TV series Third Watch, which was on for 6 years. Max Monroe, Loose Cannon. This cop show from early January was on such a brief period of time that I never saw it at all. That's worth mentioning because back in 1990, I really watched TV. And I was at least aware of every show that came on. I missed this entirely. It was on for only 8 episodes. Shadoe Stevens played the title character, a tough cop who gets the job done. It was certainly inspired by the Lethal Weapon movies and even set in Los Angeles, complete with a black partner. Hey, there were a lot of Lethal Weapon imitations. David Schramm, who would later play Roy Biggins on Wings this same year, played the police captain. Nasty Boys. This was a darn good show. It was action, and although it had some humor here and there, this was mostly serious. A pilot movie for this series had appeared in September of 1989, but the regular series started on February 19th of 1990. The Nasty Boys was the slang term for the North Las Vegas narcotic cops that the show centered on. It was another action show created by Dick Wolf. I can't believe this only lasted 13 episodes. A number of the people in this show became very famous. Dennis Franz was the lieutenant. Benjamin Bratt and Nia Peoples were also cast members. The New Adam 12. This was a revival of the original Adam 12 series. Unlike the original series, this lasted only 2 seasons in syndication and wasn't quite as popular. The previous year, the new Dragnet was started. Both of these shows, as in the past, were set in the same fictional universe. In addition, both shows featured different characters, different music, and an updated setting. The fact that there were so many changes could be the reason that it didn't find the widespread acceptance it was hoping for. Over My Dead Body. The title may have been what killed the series so early. It sounds like the title of a quirky sitcom about a ghost, but this show was anything but. It was a traditional mystery show about amateur sleuths solving crimes. It was basically like a male version of Murder, She Wrote. Edward Woodward, best known for the Equalizer TV series from 1985 to 89, was the star. He played an aging mystery writer. A young reporter woman, who was also his greatest fan, becomes his sidekick. It seems this show took some inspiration from the Father Dowling mysteries, which featured an old priest and a young nun solving mysteries. You would think a mashup of Murder, She Wrote and Father Dowling would have been a hit, but this only had 12 episodes, the last of which didn't air. I remember this show, and it deserved better than it got, but I really do think the terrible name put people off. It's better than you would think. Shades of L.A. Now this was an interesting concept. A police detective, after recovering from a gunshot wound, realizes that he can see the spirits of dead people trapped on Earth until their missions are complete. This lasted only 20 episodes in syndication, but I'm surprised this wasn't given a chance on a major network. In the years since this show, there have been a ton of helping out ghost movies and TV shows, but this was an early stab at the idea. Sunset Beat. Rare George Clooney series. He was the star of this show about LA cops working undercover as a motorcycle gang. They operate out of an abandoned fire station on Sunset Boulevard. Cool idea, but this was such a flop that only 2 episodes aired on ABC in 1990, with 4 more airing in 1992. George would later get his big break in 1994 with the medical drama ER, but he took a lot of lumps before then. Top Cops. This was CBS's answer to the success of Cops on Fox. It lasted for 3 seasons and featured recreations of true, heroic cop stories in every episode. For a while it seemed quite popular, but when it ended, it dropped out of sight and no one's been talking much about it since. Children's shows. The Babysitter's Club. This was based on the series of children's novels aimed at girls. The show had a peculiar history, to say the least. The first 4 episodes were released exclusively on VHS in August of 1990 and August of 1991. After that, the series moved to HBO, where 9 episodes showed as monthly specials from November 1991 to February 1993. In all, only 13 half-hour episodes were made. The show was later rerun on the Disney Channel from 1994 to 97. I think that's why a lot of people consider this a Disney show, although it definitely wasn't made by Disney. Unlike a lot of TV series back then, all episodes were made available on VHS by 1994. Guys Next Door. Wow, this show was just not good. At the time, the New Kids on the Block were all the rage and heavily merchandised. The idea of this show was, let's take a boy band, but not the New Kids because we can't afford them, and have them host their own sketch comedy show, like a Saturday Night Live for kiddies. And to make it really unpopular, let's put it on Saturday morning during the time that cartoons should be on. This lasted for just 13 episodes and was widely hated by just about everyone. This show was one of the things that helped kill NBC's Saturday morning programming for kids in 1992. Jim Henson's Mother Goose Stories. Jim Henson, the Muppet Master, died in May of this year. This show didn't start until August on the Disney Channel. It ran for 3 seasons. The show was pretty straightforward. It was retellings of Mother Goose stories featuring elaborate puppets and child actors. It actually did well at the time and won Emmys. Skate TV. This aired on Nickelodeon for just 13 episodes. It was a skateboard variety show hosted by Matthew Lillard, when he was known as Matthew Lynn. Skateboarding was pretty cool in 1990. Its popularity has come and gone like the tide over the years, but this show was a reflection of the fad back then. Video Power. This ran for 2 seasons in syndication. I remember seeing this show and liking it. The first season, anyway. The second season switched to a game show format and was less interesting to me. The first season, however, was mostly live action, with a cartoon segment in it called The Power Team. This was mostly a daily half-hour plug for whatever was happening in video games. A fictional host called Johnny Arcade, played by Stevie Paskowski, gave you tips and all kinds of info about the world of video games from what was, I guess, his private den for gaming. He would introduce the cartoon, my favorite part, which was a funny superhero cartoon featuring video game characters, before returning to the show. Johnny Arcade was also a character in the cartoons, although not voiced by Stevie. I thought the show was good enough, but Stevie was pretty annoying. Maybe that's how he was supposed to be, but I liked cartoon Johnny Arcade much better than live action Johnny Arcade. Still, if you want a good look at the video game phenomenon of the early 90s, this is your show. Comedy shows. American Dreamer. Could Robert Urich carry a sitcom? Apparently not very well. This only had 17 episodes. It was yet another show about a widower trying to raise his kids. At one time, Bob's character was a high-powered network correspondent, but after the death of his wife, moved to Kenosha, Wisconsin to spend more time with his kids. He wrote a small column for a Chicago newspaper. The show actually had a good cast, with Carol Kane, Jeffrey Tambor, and Johnny Galecki. I don't think it was a bad show by any means, but it just didn't last. America's Funniest People. This was a companion series created for America's Funniest Home Videos that debuted the previous year. Unlike the previous series, this show ran for only 4 seasons. It was initially very popular, but has fallen into obscurity since its original run. Bob Saget, who was then on the sitcom Full House, was the host of the first show. His co-star on Full House, Dave Coulier, was one of the hosts on America's Funniest People. Dave's co-host was originally Arlene Sorkin for the first 2 years. Arlene was a good hostess. She became the real-life inspiration and voice for the character of Harley Quinn in the Batman franchise. In 1995, she married Christopher Lloyd and had 2 children with him. Arlene's replacement was Tawny Katane, who was on for the last 2 years of the show. What made this show unique from Funniest Videos is that the first show featured funny videos of accidental mishaps, where this show featured clips of people being intentionally funny. In a way, this TV series was way ahead of its time, because many years later, people would start making videos like this on YouTube. Baghdad Cafe. It was on for only 15 episodes on CBS, but I'm still surprised I never saw it. It was a sitcom starring Whoopi Goldberg and Gene Stapleton, who played Edith Bunker on All in the Family, and they ran a truck stop. James Gammon and Cleavon Little, also excellent actors, were in the show. I was a huge fan of Whoopi's movies at the time, and I always liked Edith. It was an interesting idea for sure. I would have watched it had I known about it. The rumor is that Whoopi quit the show in a lurch and instead of recasting her, they just ended the series. It was based on an earlier movie of the same name from 1987. Big Brother Jake. Funny muscle man Jake Steinfeld was the star of this successful sitcom. It was the first sitcom made for the Family Channel and ran for 4 seasons. It had an interesting premise. Jake was a former Hollywood stuntman who moved back to Brooklyn to help out his recently widowed foster mother with their 5 foster children. A big muscle guy and little kids is always good for comedy. Blossom. I'll be straight up honest with you. I never liked Blossom. I wanted to like it, I just don't. I'm a big fan of Mayim Bialik, who plays Blossom. I liked her before the show. I liked her after the show. I just don't like this show. As a matter of fact, I like all the main cast members of this series in other projects. Just not in Blossom. The show too often tried to center on dramatic themes, and I always felt that killed sitcoms dead. A lot of people liked this show though, and it ran for 5 seasons. Mayim's look as Blossom became quite trendy in the early 1990s, and a lot of young girls tried to dress like her. The Bradys. A sequel series to the Brady Bunch that just didn't make it. Unlike the first series, it was not a sitcom, but a 1-hour comedy drama. It was a continuation of the Brady saga. An earlier attempt at a revival came in 1981 with The Brady Brides, which also tanked. That had been a half-hour sitcom of 10 episodes. The Bradys did worse, with only 6 episodes. I really think what hurt this series is the 1-hour dramedy approach. People liked the Brady Bunch as it was. Trying to 90s-ize the show didn't make it endearing. Carol and Company. Carol Burnett started another series. It should have been a huge hit, right? Well, not so much. The format was a bit different. Anyone who knows the Carol Burnett show knows that it was a variety show filled with skits and musical numbers. This was not that. It was a half-hour series with each episode being a standalone skit. It ran for 33 episodes through 1991, but it just didn't find its audience. I think it was a little too different for fans of Carol's first series to take in. I remember this show, and I thought it was alright, but it sure didn't get the acclaim of her earlier show. The thing is, she had a great cast of players, including Anita Barone, Richard Kind, Jeremy Piven, Megan Faye, and Terry Kaiser. Kaiser had already been famous for his Weekend at Bernie's movie the year before, but the other names I mentioned all got more famous later on. City. This short-lived sitcom was Valerie Harper's vehicle after all the drama that surrounded her firing from the sitcom Valerie, which then became the Hogan Family. It lasted only 13 episodes. First of all, the premise wasn't all that interesting. She was the city manager of an unnamed city, and she dealt with big city problems. Ho-hum. The cast was good, though, and included Todd Sussman, Stephen Lee, and Shay Duffin, to name a few. My personal opinion? I think Valerie rushed into having another series too fast after Valerie. Had a bit more time passed, I'm sure a better conceived show would have come up. The Dave Thomas Comedy Show. I love this show, but boy did it bomb. And I don't know why. It was something new, different, and interesting for late night television. Dave Thomas, of SCTV fame, came up with this half-hour sketch comedy show, and it was really, really funny. It lasted only 5 episodes. The first 4 shows had guest stars including John Candy, Dan Aykroyd, Chevy Chase and Martin Short, and Catherine O'Hara. The show had legs, but it was canceled way, way too quickly. Dream On. You had to have HBO to see this. It was very popular for 6 seasons, and you heard a lot of people talk about it. Since that time, though, this seems to have become obscure. Brian Benben was the star, and I've always liked him. The guy's funny. He almost has a Daffy Duck quality about him. At least I think so. Brian played a New York City book editor. He was a divorced, single father who tried to date other women, although he still carried a torch for his ex-wife. It was rare at the time for having uncensored profanity and nudity, but hey, you could get away with it on cable. It was a quirky show, made even more quirky by its use of black and white movie clips to punctuate the main character's thoughts and feelings at certain points. Evening Shade. Burt Reynolds had a hit sitcom. Who would have thunk it? It was a good show and lasted 4 seasons. It was the closest thing the 90s would ever have to an Andy Griffith show. This show is basically about small town life in Arkansas. Burt played a former professional football player who came back to Evening Shade to coach high school football. It had a really good cast of characters. One of my favorites was Nub Oliver, the harmless town weirdo who rode around everywhere on a wagon delivering newspapers. He was more intelligent than you would think, but still very childlike. The guy was just quirky and funny, as was everyone in the show. Even at that, it was a gentler comedy series and not in your face like so many of the shows that were around at the time. A Family for Joe. Hey, let's give Robert Mitchum a sitcom, said no one, ever. Robert wasn't exactly an obvious choice for a sitcom. He's not Mr. Cuddly. It started off as a TV pilot movie, then was a series for 9 episodes. Mitchum played a bum. A bunch of orphan kids, to avoid being split up, hire Joe to pose as their grandfather so they can stay together. Once he's granted guardianship, though, he actually does try to be their guardian, which meets with resistance. A number of popular actors were in this series, including Juliette Lewis and Ben Savage, but it just didn't fly. The premise was interesting, but I think someone other than Mitchum was needed. I'm not picking on him. It's just that no one can do everything. The Family Man. I liked this show quite a bit, but it was a 1-season wonder. Gregory Harrison played a fire captain who was recently widowed and trying to raise his 4 kids. Although the missing mom was a major plot point for the series, this wasn't a downer like you might think. It was actually pretty upbeat and cute. But the show struggled and format changes helped drive it into the dirt. The Finelli Boys. This is one of 2 new sitcoms from this year to be centered around a funeral home, although the other, Good Grief, dealt more with the actual duties of a funeral home. It's hard to make this appealing for comedy. The show actually had a good cast, including Joe Pantoliano and Ann Gilbert, but it was canceled after 19 episodes on NBC. Ferris Bueller. A TV series based on the popular movie Ferris Bueller's Day Off should have been a hit, right? Wrong. I actually liked this series. I liked Charlie Schlatter, who replaced Matthew Broderick in the role. It wasn't the movie, but it was a good show in its own right. It only lasted 13 episodes. This show wasn't meant to be a continuation of the movie. Instead, it was presented as the true life adventures of Ferris Bueller, of which the movie was loosely based. What probably turned off fans right away is the hatred this TV version of Ferris had against the movie version of Ferris. Early on, Charlie Schlatter's Ferris destroys a cardboard cutout of Matthew Broderick's Ferris with a chainsaw. That was too bold, given the fact that the movie had, and still has, such an incredible following. It's one of the most popular comedy movies of the 80s, so that was a bad move. Shortly after this series debuted on NBC, a Fox show called Parker Lewis Can't Lose started. Parker Lewis was undoubtedly a Ferris Bueller clone, but fared much better than the actual Ferris TV series, lasting 3 seasons and becoming a pop culture icon. The Ferris Bueller TV series, however, is barely remembered at all. The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. This was a hit, and a big one. Although I've never been sure why. I didn't like it at all, even though I did like some of the cast. First of all, I could never stand DJ Jazzy Jeff and the Fresh Prince. I thought their music videos were cheap and annoying. Rap didn't get it for me. Still doesn't. I don't know who thought it would be a cool idea to make a show about the Fresh Prince. I really didn't know why anyone would want to make a star out of Will Smith. Although I like some of the movies he's been in, I never did consider him a great actor. But this show lasted for 6 seasons on NBC and sparked a successful acting career for Will Smith, so somebody liked it. It's another fish out of water comedy series about a homeboy who moves in with his rich relatives. Culture clash. Normally, a show like this would have appealed to me, but it often felt like a dramedy, and I hate dramedies. Get a Life. This show just drove me nuts. It starred Chris Elliott, who I like in a lot of stuff, but this show was odd to say the least. It ran for 2 seasons on Fox, and despite a good cast, it was just too weird to be charming. The show was incredibly surreal and disturbing, with Elliott's character dying in multiple episodes. Elliott's character was also meant to be unlikable and crazy, which was a stupid thing to do for a main character. The Fox network itself hated this show, but still kept it on for 2 years. I don't know if anyone can consider this show a classic, but it's the first time I noticed Chris Elliott, and he has had a much better career since then. Going Places. There weren't many of ABC's TGIF shows that didn't make it, but this was one of them. Among the main players were Alan Ruck and Heather Locklear, both of whom would work together years later on the hit show Spin City. It was about 4 young Hollywood writers renting a house together. It ran for just 19 episodes. Good Grief. In 1990, the Fox network was still young, and they put out a lot of strange shows in the hope that they would have more hits. This particular show had been turned down by every network and cable channel as far back as 1983. Why? It's a sitcom set in a funeral home. Yeah, that was a tough sell. Howie Mandel was the star. It actually had a good supporting cast, including Tom Poston. Only 13 episodes were made before they pulled the plug. Fox really specialized in the strange back then. Grand. For nearly the entire year of 1990, there was a sitcom/soap opera parody on NBC that was a lot like Soap. 25 of 26 episodes were aired. It starred a lot of good people, including Pamela Reed, Michael McKean, Bonnie Hunt, Joel Murray, and John Randolph. I despise soap operas so much that I can't even watch spoofs of soap operas. It's just not my thing. I didn't even like the soap opera farces on the Carol Burnett Show and SCTV, and those were good shows. If you like this sort of thing, though, at least there are good actors here to back it up. His and Hers. This is a Martin Mull sitcom that lasted only 13 episodes. It may have been a little ahead of its time. Had it come out 4 or 5 years later, who knows? This show was about 2 married marriage counselors with kids from former marriages. That's pretty screwed up, but more dysfunctional stuff was piled on in every episode. It was all done in a lighthearted manner, but it is weird subject matter now, let alone in 1990. The Howard Stern Show. Ugh. Howard Stern. Okay, here it is. I don't dislike the Howard Stern Show for any perceived controversial content. I just don't think Howard Stern is funny. At all. I've heard a lot of great shock jocks, but he's not one of them. He has mellowed out over the years. In 1990, he was still pretty wild. He had been hosting his own radio show for 4 years, and the WWOR TV channel in New Jersey thought it would be cool to make a TV show of it. The show was extremely controversial before it even aired, and even more so after it did. The show was a ratings hit, and it was syndicated across America. The show was ended in 1992. Howard claims it was his idea to end it. WWOR claims otherwise. At any rate, this wasn't his last TV series. He had another show from 1994 to 2005, and another one from 2006 to 2013. The TV show, however, really opened him up to a mainstream audience he never had before. The 1990s, for sure, was Howard Stern's decade. Controversial DJs became all the rage, and a lot of people tried to steal Howard's thunder once he got big. In living color, I freaking love this show. What a cultural phenomenon it became. It was a sketch comedy show, initially intended to be the Black Saturday Night Live, but it became so much more than that. Men and women of all colors got their chance to shine. It ran for 5 seasons on Fox. The show was started by Keenan Ivory Wayans, who had been making a name for himself in films and stand-up. It featured the Wayans family and a large cast of players including David Alan Grier, Tommy Davidson, and Jim Carrey. Jamie Foxx came in with the 3rd season. In the early years of the show, Damon Wayans became the breakout star and quickly got into movies. For a long time, it would seem this would stand. The biggest star to come from this series, though, would be Jim Carrey. And that wasn't until after the series ended. And did he ever become a superstar? Jim Carrey is undoubtedly a Hollywood legend. Jamie Foxx would also become a superstar long after the show ended. Because it was on Fox, and because Fox didn't have that many hits at the time outside of Married with Children, the show was allowed to push boundaries at the time. It was a primetime show that got away with things that Saturday Night Live wasn't able to do on late nights. There was pushback from the censors and the network for sure, and it wore on Keenan. But it made a lot of people very famous, and the show, for its all too short run, is still one of the most successful sketch comedy shows ever done. It's right up there with Saturday Night Live, SCTV, and Mad TV. Lenny. This was a short-lived sitcom for the stand-up comedian Lenny Clark. There were 17 episodes and an unaired pilot. It struggled in ratings the entire time. Although it wiped out Lenny's chances as a series lead, he became a busy and recognizable character actor to this day, and he had a famous role as Uncle Teddy on the TV show Rescue Me. When you think of funny guys from Boston, Lenny Clark is one of the bigs, and this show, although little known today, helped to establish him in this way. Maniac Mansion. This was a sitcom on the Family Channel that ran for 3 seasons. There's a lot of SCTV influence in this offbeat show. Probably because it was created by Eugene Levy, and stars Joe Flaherty and other SCTV players like John Hemphill, Mary Charlotte Wilcox, and George Buza. Main SCTV players like Dave Thomas, Martin Short, and Andrea Martin even made guest appearances. If you like goofy horror-themed comedy shows like The Munsters, you'll probably like Maniac Mansion. It's out there, but it's safe for kids to see, and it's funny. Flaherty plays an absent-minded scientist, and the whole family is rolled into his crazy misadventures. It is loosely based on the 1987 video game of the same name. Malloy. This is an interesting rarity of TV history. Mayim Bialik was the star of this very short-lived sitcom, right before Blossom. I liked this show much better. At the same time this was in production, she did a pilot for Blossom. Mayim had a decision to make. She could only do 1 series, so one had to fail. Malloy was on Fox and wasn't doing well. Blossom's pilot on NBC had much higher ratings, so guess which show won out? 7 episodes of Malloy were made, with only 4 being aired. It was also the TV debut of Jennifer Aniston, who would become a superstar just 4 years later with Friends. Both Malloy and Blossom had some similarities. Dr. John did the theme songs for both of them. My Talk Show. This was a show about a woman who hosted a talk show. It aired in syndication for 59 episodes, but only from September 1990 to March 1991. Cynthia Stevenson was the star, and she is actually quite good. I have always enjoyed her work. She would later play Bob Newhart's daughter on the sitcom Bob, and Hope in the sitcom Hope and Gloria. Throughout the 90s and 2000s, she became a very familiar face in TV and movies. New Attitude. I thought this was interesting to talk about because it's one of the few TGIF shows that didn't make it, and boy did this really not make it. ABC had a popular lineup of comedy shows for years that they called TGIF. It had so many hits like Full House, Family Matters, Step by Step, Dinosaurs, and others. New Attitude had only 8 episodes and 2 didn't even air. It was about 2 sisters who ran a beauty salon. Morris Day, who was the lead singer of the time and had done a bit of acting, was part of the supporting cast. Normal Life. This sitcom, lasting only 13 episodes, was based on the unconventional home life of rock star Frank Zappa and his kids. It starred Dweezil Zappa and his sister Moon Unit. It was yet another comedy show from 1990 delving into the weird, but at that time, really weird families weren't that well explored or celebrated. Northern Exposure. This was a different kind of comedy drama series. I liked things about it, but it wasn't my favorite show. Some of the characters were amusing. This is basically a fish out of water story about a young New York City doctor who is sent to a small town in Alaska to become a general practitioner. It ran for 6 seasons, and a lot of big stars came from this show like Rob Morrow, Janine Turner, John Corbett, Terry Polo, and Barry Corbin. Where the show lost me a bit is that it often delved into the dramatic or philosophical. I didn't get a lot of belly laughs out of this show, but some things made me smile. Marilyn Whirlwind, the chubby native receptionist for our doctor hero, was my favorite character. She was friendly enough, but didn't talk much. Her action spoke volumes, though. Marilyn was played by Elaine Miles, who I always felt should have been in more stuff. Parenthood. In 1990, there were many shows based on popular movies that didn't make it. Parenthood was one of them. Unlike a lot of attempts, Parenthood actually seemed right for the sitcom treatment. However, it lasted only 12 episodes. The real problem may have been in the casting. All of the major players were different from the film. However, a number of people in the show became big stars later on, including Leonardo DiCaprio, David Arquette, and Thora Birch. Ed Begley Jr., who played the Steve Martin role, had been around for quite a while before this, but became even more visible in the 1990s decade and beyond. Parker Lewis Can't Lose. Although the Fox network had bigger hits before and after this show, Parker Lewis did quite well, lasting 3 seasons. It was definitely inspired by the popular movie Ferris Bueller's Day Off. But unlike the Ferris Bueller TV series that was attempted just shortly before this series started, Parker Lewis was a success. It has a strong cult following, and in the early 90s, this was considered pretty hip. By the middle of the decade, though, a show like this wouldn't take, as the look and feel of the show dated itself pretty fast. People got more glum as the 90s went on. I liked this show, and it had a good cast of actors. Pirate TV. What happens when MTV tries to make a sketch comedy series like Saturday Night Live? Usually something terrible. This show lasted for 13 one-hour episodes. This particular show was aimed towards teenagers and college kids because that was MTV's audience. It may have been a bit too young, hip, and trendy to find a massive audience. Real Sex. This aired on HBO and was a sexually explicit documentary series on, you guessed it, sex. all things sex from around the world. Maybe this wasn't entirely intended to be funny, but I thought it was funny as hell. It ran for 33 seasons, ending in 2009. There's some pretty weird stuff in this world, and this show displays a lot of it. Despite its great popularity, HBO has tried to distance itself from this show ever since its cancellation. They don't even include it on their streaming services. If you like this show, you better track it down on somebody's old VHS tapes or DVD-Rs, because it is now considered lost media and probably won't see the light of day again. Return to Green Acres. This TV movie served as a reunion for the classic Green Acres show. I love Green Acres and I love this TV movie, but the two are far removed from each other in style and tone. A lot of people don't like this movie, but I do. The majority of the surviving cast came back. I did miss Kay Cuter as Newt Kiley, though. This movie lacked the wacky humor and surrealism of the series and was greatly toned down. The Douglases helped the people of Hooterville save their town from the scheme of Mr. Haney and his cohorts. It was odd to see Haney as an outright villain instead of an opportunist like he had been. Eddie Albert denounced this movie. I mostly thought it was cool to see so many of the old cast members all together in one shot. Steel Magnolias. Based on the popular movie, a pilot was made and aired on August 17th. It was set after the events of the movie and was done in a half-hour sitcom format. The show was not picked up for a series. It starred Cindy Williams, Sally Kirkland, Elaine Stritch, Polly Bergen, and Sheila McCarthy. Given the popularity of the movie, it's hard to say what went wrong and why this didn't move past the pilot. Airing it in the summer wasn't the best move. Changing the cast could have also been a factor. The biggest mistake may have been not putting it in an hour-long comedy drama format to match the movie. At any rate, this show tanked before it started. Sydney. This short-lived show of just 13 episodes could have been interesting if it was given more of a chance to shine. Valerie Bertinelli was the star. She was a private detective. Her co-stars were Matthew Perry, who played her policeman brother, and Craig Bierko, who played a lawyer and her love interest. Valerie's husband at the time, Eddie Van Halen, granted permission for the song Finish What You Started to be used as the theme. Just about everyone in this show went on to bigger things, with Perry achieving massive success with Friends just 4 years later. They Came from Outer Space. Talk about bizarre. This 20-episode syndicated series was about twin teenage boy aliens who come to Earth to bum around. They take odd jobs to support their drifter lifestyle and drive around in a red 1959 Corvette picking up women. The twins limit their focus to traveling around California. Hey, I've been there. It's a big state. I don't know how much you could explore for a whole series, though, had this lasted more than a season. The whole time the boys were being pursued by dummy Air Force guys who wanted to capture them for scientific study. There was a lot of cheesiness to this show. The 1980s and very early 90s gave way to a lot of cheesy humor of this sort. Tim Conway's Funny America. Tim Conway is a legendary comedian who enjoyed a long, fantastic career, but he never had a successful show of his own. On TV, he's best remembered as a cast member of The Carol Burnett Show and, before that, Ensign Parker on McHale's Navy. Tim became a hit in movies. He even made a lot of successful comedy videotapes featuring his Dorf character. But success with his own TV show eluded him. I don't know why. He's one of the funniest people who ever lived, and this particular series was a hit with me. This was like the earlier legendary Candid Camera series where practical jokes were played on people in order to capture their responses. Tim would take on many various personas to fool people. It was always lighthearted. This summer replacement series, made to follow America's Funniest Home Videos, only lasted 7 episodes. Totally Pauly. The 1990s was Pauly Shore's decade, and he got only more famous throughout. He was the son of comedy people, but became a bigger name than both of them. He got his big break being an MTV personality. This show was meant to be a break in the action between music videos and showed Pauly Shore doing his thing, whether it was interviewing celebrities, doing comic bits, or setting up music videos. These little episodes were shown on MTV regularly throughout 1995 and continued less frequently through 1997. If you're like me, and if you like Pauly Shore at all, you know that 1990s Pauly Shore is real Pauly Shore. I don't think anyone cares for post-Weasel, post-theatrical film Pauly Shore. Even Pauly likes his early career better. During the 1990s, he was a big comedy star, and this MTV production really kicked things into gear for him. True Colors. This lasted for 2 seasons on Fox. It was an okay show, but not a favorite. This sitcom was about a black man who married a white woman. He was widowed and she was divorced. They had a blended family. Although the show did talk about some race issues, it didn't dwell entirely on that. This show was funnier than you might expect. The show may have lasted longer than it did, but 2 of the main cast members died, so it was just decided to end it. Uncle Buck. I love the Uncle Buck movie. John Candy is one of my favorite people of all time. When I heard about a TV series coming out, I thought, awesome. When the show came on, I was a little let down. It was still alright, but Kevin Meaney wasn't a suitable replacement for John Candy. I liked Kevin alright as an actor and comedian, but he was just too different from John Candy for me to believe this was the movie character. I also didn't like the fact that the parents of the kids from the movie were killed off in this series from a car accident. The idea is that Buck is now the legal guardian of the 3 kids. Their maternal grandmother, played by Audrey Meadows, sometimes helps in the raising of the kids. I thought the series was alright, but could have been better. The cast was good enough, but I don't think this was the premise they should have gone with. It would have been better for Buck to either be living with his brother and his family, or come over for regular visits. Making Uncle Buck a parent was too much of a stretch. This lasted just 1 season of 22 episodes, 6 of which didn't even air. In an odd way, this show made TV history. In the pilot episode, the little girl Maisie tells Uncle Buck, "You suck!" It's believed this was the first time this phrase was said on television, and it caused a minor controversy. Today, however, that has become all too common to hear. What a Dummy. This was a weird sitcom, but better and funnier than you would anticipate. It was about a man who discovers a living, thinking ventriloquist dummy who had been locked in a trunk for 50 years. Buzz the dummy was none too happy about being locked away. Stephen Dorff played Tucker, the series lead, who becomes buddies with Buzz. This lasted just 24 episodes in syndication. I remember seeing this and I liked it. I think the show had promise. Wings. This was a great show with a great cast. It was very successful, running for 8 seasons. It was set in the same universe as Cheers and Frasier, and featured crossover guest appearances. The idea of the show was cool from the jump. 2 brothers were pilots working at a small airport. There was a rival airline and a wide cast of peculiar characters. One brother was the straight man, the other a goofball. Although a lot of the show was set at the airport, there was a lot that took place outside of the airport from time to time. It made big stars out of a lot of its cast, including Tim Daly, Steven Weber, Crystal Bernard, Thomas Hayden Church, and Tony Shalhoub, among others. Working Girl. This show would probably be totally forgotten by everyone today, if not for its star, Sandra Bullock. She definitely went on to have a better career after this. This sitcom was loosely based on the earlier movie starring Melanie Griffith. This office comedy is about a secretary who suddenly becomes a junior executive. 12 episodes were made, but only 8 were aired due to low ratings. David Schramm, who would later play Roy Biggins on Wings, was very busy in 1990. He was a cast member in this show and was in an earlier action series called Max Monroe Loose Cannon. Soon-to-be famous people in forgotten TV shows seems to be a theme in 1990. Working It Out. Another show that was ahead of its time and suffered for it. The stars were Jane Curtin, who I've always liked, and Stephen Collins. They were two divorced people who never considered remarriage until they met each other. This did not fare well in the ratings, and out of the 13 episodes made, 11 were aired. David Garrison, who had played Steve Rhodes on Married with Children, was a member of the cast. Throughout the 90s, divorce became a lot more prevalent, and a show like this probably would have made it in the later part of the decade. As with a lot of shows in 1990, the ideas were there, it was just a matter if it was going to take with the audiences or the networks. You Take the Kids. This extremely short-lived sitcom was meant to be the black answer to Roseanne. It starred Nell Carter, who had great success with her earlier series Gimme a Break. 6 episodes were made for CBS, with 1 unaired. Drama shows. Beverly Hills 90210. This was huge. Real huge. It made 90210 the most famous zip code in the world. When this show came out in October, it seemed like people were starting to take Fox seriously as a network for the first time. Fox did have a few really successful shows, but this was the first time something dramatic really took off for them and it became a cultural phenomenon. It was a teenage drama, and it became an immediate sensation with middle schoolers on up. So many famous people came from this show, including Luke Perry, Jason Priestley, Brian Austin Green, Shannon Doherty, Tori Spelling, Jenny Garth, so many others. It ran for 10 seasons and inspired a number of spin-offs, most notably Melrose Place. I was never into this show, but if any TV show represents the 1990s, it's Beverly Hills 90210. Brewster Place. Oprah had a drama series. Most people know Oprah for her talk show rather than her acting endeavors. This was actually a continuation of the 1989 miniseries The Women of Brewster Place. It was all about working class women in Chicago. The miniseries was acclaimed. The regular series was not. 11 episodes were made, but only 9 were aired. Capitol News. I'm not into drama shows at all. Never have been. This one, though, is different than most. It's not about cops, doctors, or lawyers. Instead, it's about a newspaper in Washington, D.C. This show tanked hard. 14 episodes were made, but only 5 were aired. It had an extremely good cast of actors, including Lloyd Bridges, Chelsea Field, Helen Slater, Daniel Roebuck, William Russ, and Mark Bloom, to name a few. There had to be more of a reason than low ratings for a show like this to be canceled so quickly. Maybe it hit a little too close to home. It was, after all, talking about scandal and abuse of power in Washington. Challenger. This TV movie aired on ABC, and it tells the story of the Challenger space shuttle disaster that happened in 1986. I remember seeing the real incident live on TV at the time, and it was mind-blowing. This couldn't have been more tragic for the people involved, more traumatic for all the people who saw it, or more of an embarrassment for NASA. The Dreamer of Oz, the L. Frank Baum story. For lack of a better category, I call this TV movie a drama, but it doesn't suck like a drama. It's a biopic about L. Frank Baum, the author of the Wizard of Oz books. John Ritter played Baum and did a great job. You find out that Baum had a lot of personal and professional failures before the success of Oz. It's interesting to find out how he came up with what he did in his Oz stories and the significance of it all. This aired on NBC. Equal Justice. Another lawyer show. This lasted for 2 seasons on ABC. It got a bit of press at the time, and it seemed to be liked by some people, but it came and went. George DiCenzo, who I like as an actor, was the lead. Sarah Jessica Parker had one of her early roles in this series. Glory Days. This 6-episode series of Fox would probably be totally forgettable if it wasn't for one of its stars, Brad Pitt. He would, of course, find great fame not too far in the future. The show was about 4 friends who drift apart after high school. Whoever thought this show would be fun to watch was a moron. That's an unpleasant thing for people to go through, and doesn't make for great weekly story material. Law and Order. Wow, did this show start something. It was a serious, dramatic show that combined police procedural with legal drama. Up until this series, most cop shows were shoot-'em-up actioners. This was like an expanded version of Dragnet with courtroom stuff thrown in. This set the tone for many, many shows to follow, and to this day, most of the cop shows that have followed Law & Order have that same serious, dramatic soap opera type quality to them. This first series in the franchise lasted for 20 seasons through 2010. It was brought back in 2022 and is still running. There have been 6 spin-off series as well as a TV movie. I always liked the more lively cop shows like Miami Vice and Hunter, to name a few. But since Law & Order came out in 1990, those previous cop shows became a thing of the TV past. The Outsiders. When I was a kid, I read the book. A movie was made in 1983. Like a lot of people, I wonder why they would want to make a regular series out of this, and how they could do it. The book, and movie, doesn't really lend itself to continuation. This hour-long show aired on Fox for 13 episodes before they reached the same conclusion. Shannon's Deal. This legal drama on NBC lasted just 14 episodes and a pilot movie. It was about a lawyer trying to make himself a better person after making many mistakes in his personal life. At the time, it was praised for its writing and acting, but it wasn't enough to make this a super hit. The Trials of Rosie O'Neill. This 2-season series starred Sharon Glass after her successful run on Cagney and Lacey. Rosie was a lawyer working for the Public Defender's Office in Los Angeles. She had personal troubles and work troubles, and I've already lost interest. Tribes. This was a daily, half-hour soap opera aimed towards teenagers. It lasted only a few months on Fox. Back then, Fox tried just about everything. Although this show bombed, Fox had much better luck later in the year with a youth-oriented soap opera in primetime, Beverly Hills 90210. Twin Peaks. Boy, did I hate this show. Mostly because I didn't know what it was. I didn't understand it a little bit. It couldn't hold my attention, and I don't know why it lasted for 3 seasons in a theatrical film. And I couldn't care less about Laura Palmer and who killed her, the often asked question in TV promos. It was weird for sure. A mystery / horror / drama. The heck of it is that I liked David Lynch, one of the show's creators, as an actor and personality. David did the voice of Gus the bartender, who actually looks like him, on the Cleveland show, and was very funny. Twin Peaks was bizarre as hell, but extremely popular during its initial run. It is definitely a show that has a cult following today, and one of the first really weird TV shows that took off in a big way. It was a sign of things to come, and very 1990s. WIOU. This was short-lived, with 13 of 14 episodes being aired. I remember watching it a few times. I'm not into dramas, and this is a news department drama, which I find especially boring. But it had a lot of great actors that I like. John Shea was the lead, and I loved when he played Lex Luthor later on in Lois and Clark, The New Adventures of Superman. Helen Shaver, Mariette Hartley, and Harris Yulin were also in the cast. Educational shows. Bob Vila's Home Again. To me, Bob Vila will always be the host of This Old House, but he left that show in 1989. He started Home Again in 1990 and continued to be a superstar in home improvement. This show lasted for 16 seasons in syndication, although it was renamed to just Bob Vila in 2005. Ken Burns' The Civil War. This miniseries aired on PBS for 5 consecutive nights. It got such a build-up, and you had to hear people talking about Ken Burns this and Ken Burns that. The ultimate documentary master. I gotta say, I don't care for his documentaries. He puts in a lot of filler, drags out a show, and makes the most interesting topics seem dry as heck. I majored in history and can't get into his stuff. I hate to be so critical, because I don't like critics. But I've tried watching his documentaries with high hopes and got burned. However, in the 1990s, Ken Burns was the most famous documentary maker around, and this one was a hit. His Civil War became the most watched program ever to air on PBS. Game shows. Big Break. This was a talent contest show hosted by singer Natalie Cole. It lasted only 1 season. R. Kelly was a winner before he achieved stardom. At that time, he was a member of the group MGM, Mentally Gifted Men. Despite being a syndicated show and short-lived, it had some extremely big guests at the time, including Whitney Houston, MC Hammer, Bill Cosby, and Patti LaBelle, to name a few. The Challengers. This was hosted by the legendary Dick Clark, and I'm surprised it wasn't a hit. I remember seeing it, and I liked it, but it only lasted for a year in syndication. Clash. 1990 was not a good year for new game shows. This show debuted on the now defunct cable channel Ha. Ha was an all-comedy channel, so this game show was meant to be silly and funny. There would be 2 teams of 3 contestants pitted against each other in a weird quiz show format. Each team would be something distinctive like cowboys, librarians, nudists, fashion designers, whatever. It lasted through 1991 and was hosted by Billy Kimball. The Great Getaway Game. This was an extremely short-lived game show on the Travel Channel, lasting just a couple months. It was a travel-themed question, answer, and word game show. Although this flopped, another travel geography type game show would come out the next year and do much better. Where in the World in Carmen Sandiego was a kids game show on PBS and ran for 5 seasons. To be fair though, Carmen Sandiego was done much, much better and was more fun to watch. The Krypton Factor. This was the second of 2 short-lived American versions of the British game show The Krypton Factor. The first American attempt was in 1981. This attempt was a bit more successful, lasting a year in syndication. The British version was far more successful, lasting from 1977 to 1995, and then revived from 2009 to 2010. The title does, indeed, take its name from Superman's home planet, Krypton, but any connection to Superman ends there. The Krypton Factor refers to the fact that the contestant must have superhuman powers to participate in the challenges. Monopoly. It's hard to believe a game show based on one of the most popular board games of all time would flop so badly, but Monopoly did. It was aired on ABC Saturday nights for a total of 13 episodes. Merv Griffin created the series, so right there, you would think this would be a hit. No. It was started as a summer replacement series and ended right there. New versions of old game shows. 1990 introduced new versions of classic game shows, including The Joker's Wild, Let's Make a Deal, Match Game, Supermarket Sweep, Tic-Tac-Dough, and To Tell the Truth. Outta Here. Another wacky kids game show from Nickelodeon that lasted about 4 months. Rodeo Drive. This aired on the Lifetime channel. It was all about celebrity gossip in Beverly Hills. The host was the incredible impressionist Louise Duarte. This woman is funny and extremely talented, but it needed more than her to make it work. An earlier pilot was made in 1989. An even earlier pilot was attempted in 1980. They really wanted this show to work, but, and it seems obvious to me, how can you make a long-running TV show based on celebrity gossip? And couldn't this show be ripe for lawsuits? The show only lasted from February to May, with reruns going through August. Then it was totally forgotten. I wish this would have worked out for Louise, though, because she's cool. The Quiz Kids Challenge. This lasted only 16 weeks in syndication. It was a quiz show where a team of kids was pitted against a team of adults. Although it didn't seem to be an appealing idea for TV at the time, this same basic idea was used, many years later, for Are You Smarter Than a Fifth Grader? And that show was a hit. Timing is everything. Trump Card. Yes, this game show had something to do with Donald Trump. It was filmed at Trump Castle in Atlantic City, New Jersey. Although Donald himself had little involvement with it, he did make an appearance in the first episode to promote it. The show lasted just one season, and although it wasn't a hit, it got the ball rolling for Trump's further adventures in television. Turn It Up. This short-lived game show wasn't even a May-December thing. It only lasted from June to December. It was the second game show MTV did after Remote Control, which was a lot more successful. As you would expect, it was a music-related game. Wild and Crazy Kids. This was a kids' game show on the Nickelodeon network, and sort of like the earlier Double Dare game show, if you know about that. It featured teams of kids competing in physical challenges, sometimes messy. This lasted through 1992. A short-lived revival was attempted in 2002. Horror and Sci-Fi. Dracula, the series. I was aware of the series at the time, but I never got a chance to see it. I saw an advertisement for it, but it was a syndicated show, and I wasn't able to catch it on my local channels. I wish I had seen it because it seemed interesting. It was a modern-day take on the Dracula saga. Van Helsing, his two nephews, and a schoolgirl named Sophie were the heroes. Every episode, they foiled a plot set in motion by the evil Count Dracula, who used the alias Alexander Lucard. This ran only one season of 21 half-hour episodes. Earth Force. This show did bad. Real bad. But I don't think it was bad enough to deserve its fate so early. Gil Gerard, most famous for playing Buck Rogers, was the lead. An elite group is assigned to prevent environmental disasters from around the world. It was a cool enough premise. CBS did a lot of bad things to its TV shows this year. And although this show only had 6 episodes made, only 3 were aired. That wasn't a long enough run to even be considered a fair shot at success. It. This popular miniseries, from the mind of Stephen King, made clowns truly scary for the first time. There had been earlier attempts, here and there, at evil clowns. But after It became popular, clowns have been portrayed, more often than not, as truly evil creatures. Clowns have gotten a lot of bad press because of Pennywise the Clown. What is often ignored is that Pennywise was, in fact, a giant alien spider in disguise. He wasn't a clown at all. I didn't care for this. I do like some of the shows based on Stephen King stories, but not this one. It's not even fun creepy. It's like a notch below Twin Peaks creepy. In 2017 and 2019, It was remade as 2 theatrically released films, and both were quite successful. Psycho 4: The Beginning. This made-for-TV movie, aired on Showtime, was actually the 5th movie in line. After Psycho 3 in 1986, there was an NBC TV movie in 1987 called Bates Motel. A different actor played Norman Bates, and it was a sequel to the original Psycho, ignoring 2 and 3. Psycho 4 was actually a prequel to the first film, but featured the return of Anthony Perkins as Norman Bates. She-Wolf of London. I would have watched this show, but it didn't last that long, and you had to be in a lucky area where you could see it in syndication. This lasted just 20 episodes, and although it was always shown in America in syndication, the first 14 episodes were made in England for HTV, a Welsh network. After HTV pulled their financial backing, the show was made in LA for its last 6 episodes. The budget took a hit, and the cast was greatly reduced. There was also a name title change to the rather lame Love and Curses. It was a horror show, but with elements of comedy and a sort of superhero show feel. An American grad student survives a werewolf attack, only to discover that she's been cursed with turning into a werewolf every full moon. In the meantime, she and her professor boyfriend search for a cure while fighting all kinds of supernatural evil. The switch to America changed the format of the show too much and brought about an early cancellation. But I think they had something good going on for a while. Music shows. Elvis. This show was so cool, and at the time, I was certain it was going to be a hit. It wasn't. 13 episodes were made, and 3 didn't air. Michael St. Gerard, who played Elvis, is still the closest they ever got to an actor who actually looked like Elvis. He was quite good. He played Elvis twice before this, both times in 1989. It was in the movies Great Balls of Fire and Heart of Dixie. After this series ended, he played Elvis again in a 1993 episode of Quantum Leap. This weekly series was a fictitious, dramatic recreation of Elvis's life in the early days, and when he was just starting to make it big at Sun Records. It premiered on my birthday, February 6th, which was a cool bonus for me. It was over in May. You knew you were going to see cool 1950s stuff and hear awesome Elvis music. The idea of Elvis himself, as a somewhat fictitious character, was interesting. Generally, if Elvis wasn't starring in a movie, he's played by others in a biographical capacity. This show was fun and ended too soon. Any Elvis fan should love it. Hull High. This aired on NBC and flopped incredibly. 9 episodes were made, with 3 unaired. It was a teenage musical show set in a high school. That could never work, right? Talk about something that was ahead of its time. Once the high school musical film got popular in 2006, which was the same darn idea, many kinds of these shows were popular in film and television. The best known example would be Glee, which lasted from 2009 to 2015. It's interesting how many failed TV ideas from 1990 were later recycled years down the road only to become hits. Night Flight. An earlier version of Night Flight had aired on the USA Network from 1981 to 88. This syndicated version ran from 1990 to 96, sometimes rerunning the old episodes. If you didn't have cable, like I didn't, this is how you saw Night Flight. They were originally 4-hour episodes. The show was largely, but not entirely, music-related, and showed all kinds of videos, B-movies, interviews, comedy, and other things that you really wouldn't or couldn't see on MTV, Friday Night Videos, and other such places. Night Flight was cool, right down to the introduction. I miss interesting late night TV like this. News shows. Peter Jennings reporting. Peter Jennings was such a huge name in the world of TV reporters. This documentary series ran until his death in 2005. It won many awards and covered all kinds of big news events. Real Life with Jane Pauley. Remember this? Probably not. It's important, though, because it was the direct precursor to Dateline, a show that started in 1992 and is still on the air as of 2025. Real Life was a news magazine type of show that ran from 1990 to 91 and struggled the whole time. This show focused on positive human interest stories, celebrity profiles, and looks into societal trends. Although this didn't take for Jane, Dateline came along, was much more serious, and became a huge hit. Superhero shows. The Death of the Incredible Hulk. This was the third and what turned out to be the final TV movie of the Incredible Hulk. It was cool up until the end. I wasn't a great fan of the earlier Incredible Hulk series, but I loved the TV movies. They stepped up their game. Believe it or not, Marvel was trying to make a Marvel Cinematic Universe as far back as 1988 with the first Hulk reunion film, The Incredible Hulk Returns. This movie introduced Thor, and a TV series was planned for him, but didn't happen. In 1989, The Trial of the Incredible Hulk introduced Daredevil and his enemy, the Kingpin. Likewise, a Daredevil TV series was planned, but didn't happen. The ratings were extremely good for these movies, so that was probably a mistake. This film was originally intended to feature She-Hulk, but didn't feature any other superhero character at all. It also did truly kill the Incredible Hulk at the end. The Hulk was always intended to be resurrected in the next movie, but due to Bill Bixby's death, who played David Banner, it never happened. Iron Man as well was planned to be introduced in the movies at some point. Thus endeth Marvel's first attempt at a shared live-action universe. I was so let down at the end of this movie. Who wants to see the Hulk die? And then know that's where it stands? Upsetting. The Flash. I loved this show back then, and I still do. This still stands as the best adaptation of the character, in my opinion. At the time, it was a departure from the comic books. This was the Barry Allen version of the character who, in 1990, had been dead in the comics for some time. His nephew Wally West was the new Flash, but in Barry's costume. Most of the supporting cast was unique to this show. In 1989, the Batman movie was a huge success. The tone of this show matched that of Batman. It was kind of dark and a little bit goofy. Even the theme music by Danny Elfman sounded a lot like what he did for the Batman film. John Wesley Shipp as the Flash was a good choice. He was a cool-looking and cool-acting guy. Amanda Pays, the hot English actress, played Tina McGee, the Flash's scientist friend, love interest, and sidekick of sorts. These two worked really well together. I'd have to say that everyone in the regular cast was great and had well-defined personalities. The stories were interesting, and the special effects were pretty darn good at the time. The shame of it all is that this only lasted one season. Shipp himself has said that this was canceled more because of network politics than ratings. I remember at the time that this show got preempted a lot because of other TV events and moved around on the schedule a bit. It wasn't easy to find on TV from week to week. Then it got canceled. Until the next Flash TV series started in 2014, this series had been forgotten by just about everyone, but not me. I've always loved this show and highly recommend it. Superforce, an original TV creation, not based on a comic book superhero. Although the show isn't well known today, it lasted for 2 seasons in syndication. It starred Ken Olant as the title character. I've always liked him as an actor. He was the top guy in the first Leprechaun movie, among many other TV and film appearances. This series also had a lot of other good actors in it. This was a half-hour show, and intended to be a companion series for Superboy. As much as I have always liked superhero shows and the Superboy character, that old series smacked of cheesiness, and I wasn't a fan. Unfortunately, That rubbed off on Superforce. There was a lot of hokiness to this. You have to forgive some of it because, after all, it's a superhero show. You have to concede to some hokiness from every superhero show, even from the Marvel blockbusters. Superboy and this show, however, had a bit more than their share. Still, a man fighting crime in a robot suit with lots of gadgets is pretty cool. I won't poo-poo on it all the way. Swamp Thing. This DC superhero character had his own series that lasted for 3 seasons on the USA Network. He was given his first film in 1982 that is considered a classic. In 1989, there was a sequel of sorts with The Return of the Swamp Thing. That movie bombed and took years to reach cult status. Where the first movie was serious, the second was purposely cheesy. When the TV series started, it was decided to make it more serious in tone again. It was one of USA's top-rated shows and got a lot of praise from fans. Zorro. As much as I love the Zorro character, I'm sorry to say that I didn't see this at the time it originally aired. It was on the Family Channel, and I didn't have cable. I know at some point it was aired in syndication on local stations, but it just wasn't that common to see on TV. I liked what I saw. This ran for 4 seasons. It was well filmed, well acted, and I'm surprised it isn't better known today than it is. Believe it or not, this series has 10 more episodes than the famous Disney series of Zorro from the 50s. Talk shows. Into the Night with Rick Dees. He was the famous DJ who had the popular hit song Disco Duck in 1976. In 1990, Rick was given his own late-night talk show that lasted 1 season on ABC. He guest starred on a number of popular TV shows around this time, but when it was over, it was over. I thought he did a decent job with his talk show, but it was a more casual format than the usuals like The Tonight Show, David Letterman, and Arsenio Hall, and it just didn't seem to fit. The Jesse Jackson Show. I would have thought this show would be a hit, given Jesse Jackson's name power and historical significance, but it fell flat. By 1991, it was over. A big problem was with Jesse himself. Not to be mean, but he just didn't have the talent it takes to be a successful talk show host. Anyone you know who had a hit talk show, Oprah, Maury Povich, whoever, they had some kind of charisma and engagement with the audience. Jesse is always very serious and ticked off, and he deep dove into some heavy politically charged topics and social issues. It was a bummer to watch. Sometimes a person needs to lighten up. The Marsha Warfield Show. When this came out, I thought it was going to be a big hit and last for years. It lasted for just 10 months on NBC. Go figure. Marsha was quite popular as a stand-up and for playing Roz on Night Court. I also thought she was good as a host. This was a daytime talk show, and lighthearted at that, which I always liked. She also had a basketball hoop on the set. Odd enough, this show was mentioned in the movie Suburban Commando that came out in late 1991. By that time, Marsha's talk show had been long canceled, so it is a good indicator of when the movie was actually filmed. Other TV events of 1990. February 24th. The series finale of Mama's Family is aired. The main character, Thelma, becomes a grandma again, and the baby is named Tiffany Thelma. Mama's Family is notable for its peculiar broadcast history. It aired on NBC for its first 2 seasons beginning in 1983 and didn't do very well. After a 2-year hiatus, the show came back in syndication and did better than ever, lasting 4 more seasons. At this time, such a move wasn't very common or popular, but they followed the example of an earlier series, Too Close for Comfort, that did the same thing and worked. Like it or not, Mama's Family was a 1980s hit, and it seemed appropriate that it ended in early 1990. I loved the show, and wish we had some funny Southern TV families today. March 24th. Alf aired what turned out to be its last episode on this date. The episode was a cliffhanger ending where Alf, the cute fuzzy alien, was actually captured by the military. The show was promised a 5th season by NBC, but they ultimately pulled back. This series, as much as I liked it, couldn't have had more drama behind the scenes. The human cast, all of whom I like, had a miserable working experience with long hours. The show would have had a format change in the next season that would have greatly limited their involvement. It wasn't until 1996 when this cliffhanger was finally resolved with the TV movie Project Elf. Although an awesome comeback for Elf, I miss the Tanner family. April 14th. CBS assumed the role as Major League Baseball's network under a 4-year deal. There are 2 reasons why this is significant, to me anyway. First of all, baseball used to be a really huge deal until the baseball strike of 1994. No matter what anyone says, baseball has never fully recovered from that. Up until then, baseball was shoved down everyone's throat on TV, and whether you loved it or hated it, I hated it, you always knew when it was on. Secondly, CBS made sure you saw their precious baseball, and a lot of good shows they started this year got pushed off the schedule because of it. Between baseball and coverage of the Gulf War, a lot of great shows were doomed. April 30th. The long-lost pilot episode for I Love Lucy was aired on CBS as a special. This was quite an event. As for the episode itself, there were much better episodes of the series. May 4th. Jim Henson, the Muppet Man, makes his last public appearance on the Arsenio Hall show. He would die less than 2 weeks later, and the Muppets took a hit that they would never recover from. If you watch this appearance, you can see Jim wasn't acting quite right. I like the guy a lot, but he wasn't himself. May 7th. Stephanie Kramer makes her final appearance as Sergeant Dee Dee McCall on Hunter. She was a major part of the series, opposite of Fred Dryer as Rick Hunter. The show had 2 female replacement characters after Dee Dee for the last season. The first one was terrible and was killed off. The second one was quite a bit better and could have really worked out, but the ratings dropped so hard with the first replacement that the show never recovered. May 12th. Andrew Dice Clay hosts Saturday Night Live. That within itself was not revolutionary. However, the controversy behind it made headlines. Nora Dunn, a cast member of the show, made a big stink about the controversial comedian being on the show and very loudly denounced it in public. What was odd about that is that Sam Kinison, a comedian who was just as controversial, had been on the show a few times already, and Nora didn't have a problem with it. SNL kept Andrew on as a host, as planned. Nora did not appear in the episode, and her run on Saturday Night Live ended soon after. The show even made fun of Nora's fit in the opening moments of Andrew's episode. Surprisingly, when interviewed about this, Andrew isn't quite as mean about Nora Dunn as she was to him because he had nothing against her in the first place. It was all rather one-sided. He is, however, very happy that things turned out so badly for her. May 21st. The series finale of Newhart was aired and was a major TV event. The show was extremely popular, and this last episode was heavily anticipated. It was revealed that the entire series was just a dream of Dr. Bob Hartley, Newhart's character from his earlier series, The Bob Newhart Show. When I first saw this, I thought it was mind-blowing and most clever. Some people thought it was a letdown, but I don't think it ruined anything. The series had a lot of weird characters in it. The fact that it was all a dream actually made sense. July 16th. Johnny Depp makes his final appearance on the hit show 21 Jump Street. July 31st. The Lifetime Network is famous for its dramatic TV movies, but it wasn't until this date in 1990 that they aired their very first Memories of Murder. This was actually an action movie, and it starred Nancy Allen of RoboCop fame, with such co-stars as Olivia Brown from Miami Vice and the singer Vanity. September 8th. Fox Kids, the children's programming block on Fox, begins on this day. When I was a kid, I loved Fox Kids. They had good cartoons and commercials. It was just a lot of fun. Other channels, depending on where you lived, may have had cartoons playing on weekday afternoons. But Fox was the only network that had a specified weekday afternoon and Saturday programming block. It lasted until 2002, just one day short of its 22nd anniversary. September 10th. The Disney Afternoon Children's Programming Block aired in syndication for the first time. This was a 2-hour block featuring 4 half-hour cartoon shows. Initially, the block consisted of older shows including Gummy Bears, DuckTales, Chip 'n Dale Rescue Rangers, with the new show Tailspin. By the next year, the new show Darkwing Duck replaced Gummy Bears. As the block went on, through 1997, it continued the practice of changing the lineup every year. The block dropped its name in 1997, but continued until 1998. September 15th. The CBN Family Channel renamed itself the Family Channel. In 1998, it would again be renamed to Fox Family. November 10th. Saturday Night Live had a sort of renaissance in 1990. Chris Farley, Adam Sandler, Chris Rock, David Spade, Rob Schneider, Tim Meadows, and Julia Sweeney joined the cast. Initially, and for much of the 1990s, Chris Farley was the breakout star and had a successful movie career until his untimely death. It's amazing, but all of these people became big names. Adam Sandler started a successful media empire with his Happy Madison Productions. All of them have done and continue to do well. November 17th. The last original episode of Pee-wee's Playhouse airs. Reruns would continue until 1991. November 22nd. The Undertaker, one of the most famous wrestlers of all time, makes his WWF debut. December 3rd. ABC's Nightline program attracts a lot of controversy when they show Madonna's now infamous music video for Justify My Love. The video had explicit sexual content, and it was followed by a sweeping ban of the video by MTV and other networks around the world. Oops! TV celebrity debuts of 1990. Jennifer Aniston. As mentioned earlier, her first TV appearance was a regular role in the short-lived sitcom Malloy. This has been ignored and largely forgotten. Jennifer's first really popular thing was her role in the 1993 horror film Leprechaun. The year after that, she starred in Friends, and the rest is history. Jason Biggs. Long before he got famous in the American Pie movie in 1999, Jason Biggs made his first appearance doing a voice in an episode of HBO's Storybook Musicals. Matt Damon. He had been doing movies for 2 years at this point, but his first TV appearance was in the 1990 TV movie Rising Sun. Leonardo DiCaprio. His first role was in an episode of Growing Pains this year. David Duchovny. Although he had been doing movies for 2 years, David didn't make his first TV appearance until this year in an episode of Twin Peaks. He played DEA agent Dennis. When he finally broke out in 1993 with the X-Files TV show, he played FBI agent Fox Mulder. Chris Farley. He made his big break right away this year as a new member of Saturday Night Live and hit the ground running. I was always a huge fan. He had quite a movie career going until his untimely death. I miss him, and we need somebody that funny again. There are good comedians now, But there are no notable funny fat men these days, and no one that can give you belly laughs like Chris Farley could. Damon Hansu. He made a few music videos and a movie appearance already, but his first TV appearance was in a 1990 episode of Beverly Hills 90210, playing the doorman. Kid and Play. Both of them. Christopher Reed, known as Kid, and Christopher Martin, known as Play, had been doing music videos for 3 years and had a successful movie with House Party. But their TV acting debuts came with the Kid and Play animated series in 1990, where they played themselves in live action. Tobey Maguire. He became famous for playing Spider-Man in 2002, but long before that, in 1990, he played Hot Rod Brown in the TV movie Tales from the Whoop, Hot Rod Brown, Class Clown on the Nickelodeon channel. Tobey played a brat who needed guidance from his guardian angel, played by Whoopi Goldberg. Michael Oliver. He got famous for playing Junior in the 2 Problem Child movies. His acting career was all too brief, by his own choice. He made his TV debut in 1990 in an episode of Amen. Robin Shou. He had been doing movies for 3 years before he made his TV debut in an episode of the series Yellow Thread Street, a short-lived British series on the ITV network. Jonathan Taylor Thomas. He played Kevin Brady in the short-lived TV show of The Bradys this year. By the next year, he was on Home Improvement and became one of the biggest child stars of the 1990s. Will Smith. Although he had been making music videos for a while, his first TV acting gig was on an episode of the ABC After School specials in April. In September, he started the famous sitcom The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. Casper Van Dien. I like this guy. He's a very good actor and he's had quite a career. His TV debut came in 1990 with the TV movie Menu for Murder. Shawn Wayans. Of the Wayans family fame, got his start as a regular on In Living Color. Elijah Wood. His first appearance on TV was in the 1990 TV movie Child in the Night. 1990, as a specific year, is often overlooked for its important television history, but when it comes to the 1990s decade, there wasn't any year quite as important as this one. It took TV into new and sometimes scary new territory. Anytime you want to revisit 1990, hop into the time machine I like to call the One Step Past channel and turn on your Tell Me Vision.